start with Mr. Alaje. What are your expectations from this meeting? Mr. Olayemi Cardoso is ready to reel out the resolution. What do you expect? Mr. Paul Alaje, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Well, my expectation for the meeting is that I expect the central bank to hold all rates, because when you look at what was done.
All right, then I think I will talk to Mr. Olojede now. Mr. Olojede, if you can hear me on your part, I would like you to react to moves by government to cut spending, cost of governance. We see the president being deliberate about this. What is your submission in regards to this, and how will it help shaping the economy as we expect?
Well, it's a welcome development. A lot of people have been looking forward to when government is going to start making sacrifice. So it is good news to hear that all those wasteful spending are being curtailed. It started when the president himself, remember that incident when he went to attend, I think it was one world event, and we had like 1,000 people, in attendance, beating almost all the records in the books about a number of attendees. Nigerians were not happy with that. And subsequent to that, he said, okay, when I go on this kind of tour, it will be a limited number of people. I think some numbers were mentioned then. So this is a further extension of initiatives such as that. Ministers cannot just be jumping all over the open, because there are extra code implications. There are accommodation cost implications. There are other expenses that are associated with those foreign trips. So as much as possible, let's curtail those as part of the sacrifice that government is also making in this season when there is economic hardship all across the country.
Indeed. Let me ask Mr. Paul Alaje now if you can hear me. Mr. Alaje, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Good. So I said, what do you think will be running through the minds of the policy decision makers today as the CBN governor is set, or is already reeling out the resolution after the two-day MPC meeting before we head to Abuja?
A lot of parameters, a lot of things on the mind of Mr. Cardoso and his team. The first is inflation, over 31%. Mr. Cardoso projected inflation to increase to 32.77%, which means reducing rate may not be an option right now if inflation have a potential to increase further. As policymaker and as monetary authority, what therefore is the core mandate? The core mandate of central bank is to combat inflation and also study the origin of inflation. Recall that Mr. Cardoso and his team, through the research department of central bank, had revealed that the reason why 400 basis points was necessary was because the money supply has increased sporadically between the last time MPC met to the one they met earlier last month. So the implication is important for Monetary Policy Committee to move rate. The question whether or not it was necessary to remove by 400 basis points is another kettle of fish. That was for last month. This month, my expectation, and given the fact of what is going on, is that yes, money supply increase, especially from the public sector. Meanwhile, private sector, we have a lot to grapple. And for people like me, who are the economic watchers and those who are making useful projection for the economy so the economy can improve and become better, we're of the opinion, and indeed our organization is of the opinion, that rates will be kept the same to feel the impact of 400% basis point movement, and also to see what CRR will be, having adjusted. The good news is the liquidity ratio remains the same, while CRR increase and MPR increase. And I think all of these are the things that will form the Monetary Policy Committee decision today, and eventually we will see what monetary authority will do. If we reduce rate, it has implication. If we increase rate, it has implication. If we sit on the fence, it also has implication.
Right,
no
Mr. Paul Alaje, allow me to interject you, and let's head to Abuja now, where the CBN governor is addressing live, and get some feeders. I hear the CBN has increased rate again. So let's get the live pictures from Abuja.
System against potential risks in an increasingly globalized world. Consequently, at this meeting, the MPC was faced with the option of either progressing with its tightening cycle or hold to observe the impact of the previous rate hike and adjustment of the cash reserve requirement. After reviewing the balance of risks and the near-term inflation outlook, members were convinced of the need to progress with the tightening cycle. Key developments in the domestic and global economies. Domestic headline inflation rose further to 31.70% in February 2024 from 29.9% in January. Food inflation accelerated to 37.92% from 35.41%, while core inflation rose to 25.13% from 23.59%. Key drivers of inflationary pressure remain the strong exchange rate pass-through to domestic prices, rising cost of transportation, high cost of energy and other production inputs, lingering insecurity, especially in food-producing areas, and legacy infrastructure deficits. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics showed that real GDP grew by 3.46% in the fourth quarter of 2023, compared with 2.54% in the previous quarter. Staff forecasts for 2024 indicate that the Nigerian economy will grow by 3.38%. Disruptions to the global supply chain associated with pockets of geopolitical tensions continue to pose a key concern to monetary policy. Global inflation has, however, continued to decelerate in 2024, but is expected to remain above the long-run objectives of major central banks. Interest rates of advanced economy central banks are thus expected to remain high in the short to medium term before commencing a descent. Consequently, global financial conditions may remain tight through 2024. Accordingly, the committee will continue to monitor developments in the global and domestic economies to ensure that inflationary expectations are anchored to restore and sustain macroeconomic stability. All 12 members attended the meeting. The next MPC meeting will be held on the 20th and 21st of May 2024. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. That was communique number 151, presented by the MPC chairman and governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Olayemi Kadusu. We now take questions from the media. Please state your name, your medium, and then ask your question. Okay?
Thank you very much. My name is Sunday Michael Ogu. I write for the Trust newspaper. Mr. Governor, I've got two questions. The first one is...
All right, then it's news. Well, the CBN governor has said it live there for you. The monetary policy rate has been hiked by 200 basis points. Yes, and MPR, the MPC has also raised the cash reserve ratio to 45%. Yes, that is what we have now. It's a question and answer session now, but I still have Mr. Paul Alaje and, of course, Mr. Bola Olojede with me here to continue this conversation. Very important one. I'm going to start with Mr. Olojede. We know that there have been a lot of issues around Nigeria's economy, and we just talked about cutting cost of governance. And now, what is your general overview to some of the challenges faced on the back of subsidy removal and the FX liberalization, and what has followed through? What do you make of it?
Well, it has been a very tough season. Sometimes when I listen to certain analysis of what is going on, it's as if sometimes we try to analyze Nigeria in isolation. So we're not looking at the context that perhaps what is going on in Nigeria is not particularly different from Ghana, and even extend all the way to the West. Anyway, because we are here in Nigeria, I understand that we should be more concerned about what is going on here. Of course, the subsidy removal had consequences, and I don't think we were really as prepared as we should have been for the consequences of that removal. However, with benefit of hindsight now, government has started to now take certain steps to deal with the effect of that policy. A major effect of that policy has been the pressure on inflation. So dealing with inflation, in fact, the key drivers of that inflation were such that inflation was under tremendous pressure. So you have the transport cost, you have the energy cost, you have the food cost. All those things were, combining together to exert inflationary pressure on the economy. To complicate that is the FX problem. So we have a country where we're largely import dependent, even as far as food is concerned. A lot of what we eat is still imported in this country. So when the FX problem added to it, it just messed up things. However, what we can see obviously is that some things are beginning to change from the FX side of things. We have seen as the dollar, which went as bad as 1,900, has come down at a point in time. It actually stabilized around the 1,600 window. I happened to buy some dollars last week, and I got it for 1,493. Now, sequel to selling dollars at 1,251 to Bureau de Change, it is expected that there will be further downward pressure on the dollar. I mean, that maybe the Naira will respond to that by firming up a little bit. So there seems to be consistency and boldness in how the monetary authorities have approached the issue of the economic challenges that we are facing. And we are beginning to see how rise in interest rates has exerted pressure on the against the further depreciation of the Naira, and we have seen the Naira firming up against the dollar. What we have not seen much of is the implication of this Naira firming up on inflation. So when the effect is that inflation will likely be lagging behind a leading factor, which is that correction in the FX situation, until when importers and manufacturers begin to import new raw materials under the revised, the FX that is a little bit better now. That's when we will begin to see the effect. So the effect on inflation will be a bit lagging. It will take a bit of time for us to begin to see those improvements. However, there is no doubt that the FX is firming up, Naira is firming up, and it is good news.
While I get Mr. Paul Alaje to react to the same. Mr. Alaje, we thought the MPC was going to take this cautious step and look around before they make any move. But to my surprise, and I'm sure it is to your surprise too, 200 basis points is what we have on it. So as of today, our monetary policy rate stands at 24.75%. And the CRR has also been moved to 45%. You are an economist.
Yeah, for merchant banks.
Yes, make us understand what this means for the real sector.
Okay, so from what it means for the real sector is that borrowing money will become relatively more difficult because the rate will now be very high. This has implication on growth. Can you hear me, sir?
Loud and clear.
Okay, this has implication on growth. I think the central bank basis for taking the decision is that the projection for Nigeria economy is that Nigeria is going to have positive growth rate. I also need to make us remember that in 2015, 2016, Christine Lagarde, the IMF boss, told Nigeria was going to have a positive growth rate, and therefore Nigeria have corridor to play with by adjusting the MPR at a time. Unfortunately, Nigeria ended the year in a recession. One, because there are externalities that are beyond Nigeria's control. Today, we're looking at one of the highest interest rate ever, which have implication on the real sector, according to your question. So here is it. To borrow fresh money from the banks, one need to now pay more. Now, if this becomes disincentive to investment because of money supply and control of the same, the central bank is targeting. I mentioned to you in my opening remark in this interview that it is true that we have increase in money supply. But what we need to investigate if that increase in money supply was spearheaded by private sector or public sector. And I've mentioned to you that according to the FARC report, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, among other agencies of government and even private sector research, it is revealed that this money supply is more to the public sector. And as we speak, we have not seen tremendous movement into private sector. So if private sector is championing increase in money supply as a result of humongous increase, almost by 300% increase that is shared at FARC, most of which have gone to the subnational, and we have not traced them to the public sector, then I can tell you that even in spite of this energy, we might not see inflation reduce to 21% target for the year, neither will it be to 6 to 9% target for the Central Bank of Nigeria. So while I understand the background Central Bank has given, I think it's important for us to take a lot of precaution so that we don't increase rate and take out employment, because this has implication on employment, it has implication on growth, and of course it has implication on investment. When you increase rate beyond certain threshold, some of which we are beginning to see at over 24%, it will definitely have implication. It may crowd out investment, it may crowd out employment, and eventually it may be counterproductive to growth that we are looking for. Inflation is high and we must do something about it. But when you read the Bureau of Statistics that reveal the source of inflation to us, one, food inflation, if we don't boost our food supply, people may not have money to buy. The strategy, and it's important for me to clarify this, the strategy of classical economics is that when there is not enough money supply, it will force down price. It is taken for granted that supply and productivity is high. In Nigeria, our real challenge is not because of the excess supply. I know that is a problem for public sector, but the real problem we have is that we don't have enough, and I mean enough supply side. The supply side for FX reduced, supply side for food reduced, supply side for manufactured goods reduced. So our strategy, therefore, and I'm hoping I'm speaking to Mr. President and his key team, is that monetary policy have gone ahead to take a decision to favor monetary side, which of course they are at liberty and the law permits them to do it. Nothing is wrong with it. But the fiscal arm, headed by Ministry of Finance, must also respond very quickly by ensuring that Ministry of Agriculture is directed alongside all other state Ministry of Agriculture to boost money supply, to work on logistics, so that this policy will not become counterproductive, and rather than people having sufficient, it will not crowd out investment and employment at the same time.
Great stuff. Mr. Olojede, I would ask you this this time. Mr. Paul talked around Federal allocation, which is already improving or has increased significantly. We see states sharing, states, federal government and local governments sharing more than ₦1 trillion in some cases. That never used to happen. Many are now arguing, or experts are saying that there is a needed support from state governments to complement whatever the federal government is doing. We have the CNG buses that are expected to help address issues of transportation. We also see support for small businesses, support for the manufacturing sector. But the states have a role to play in this to complement government. What is your assessment with what you've seen so far aside from handouts being given out to few Nigerians?
Nothing much is going on at the sub-sovereign levels. It's not even cited a single CNG vehicle. I remember a neighboring state had said, "Oh, we're going to bring in this number of CNG vehicles, and we are going to provide CNG infrastructure at all the bus stops." How far is that project today? So, in the place of saying, there are a lot of government that have said stuff, but when it comes to doing, there is not much on the ground to show for doing. What we have seen appears to be, in certain instances, selfish sub-sovereign government who see the dramatic increase in money, in inflow, as an opportunity to make money. So they took some of this money was said to have landed in the foreign exchange market, where people were buying FX to stock up and be able to profiteer from that stock up over time. Of course, some of them must be crying right now if they have not got out of of that market in good time. Because for those who stockpiled at 1,800, they must be seeing blood everywhere now, as it were. However, it depends, it beholds on the people themselves to also begin to ask questions. Show more interest in what is coming to your state. Ask questions. How is this money impacting you? Ask your representative. Yes, there are houses of assemblies in all these places. There are councillors at the level of the local government. Can we begin to ask for more, demand for more, so that the people who are in charge of this wallet are not just taking this additional money? There is no doubt they've been receiving some as much as 50%, 45% more money. How is this more money impacting life? Let people ask their governors. Let's ask our local government chairmen what they are doing with this additional fund, because it is in the space of working together to provide succor to the people that we can begin to reduce some of this, or help to manage some of the effects of the prevailing economic circumstances.
Yeah, interesting, brilliant stuff. Mr. Paul Alaje, I want to come back to you, taking it from what Mr. Olojede just said, looking at the FX angle of it. As at today, we see that the central bank is selling to BDCs at 1,251 naira to $1. That sounds good. It was about 1,900 at the time, almost 2,000 naira, and we see this gradual recovery of the naira against the greenback. But I would ask you, how sustainable is this? Do you think we could take this down to, say, 1,000 naira or 900 naira? I think the CBN is looking at 800 or 850 naira. How feasible is this?
Well, first, let me say that I'm happy that the central bank have taken precaution eventually. And central bank have gotten to a point where they realize that Nigeria cannot float the currency. We have made that argument. I remember I have 3 separate conversations with you live in the studio to re-emphasize the fact that Anthony Joshua and Mr. Macaroni, if they are asked to have a boxing contest, Momiwa, the stage wife of Mr. Macaroni, will need to buy a stretcher, because I'm not sure he'll be able to do the next kit, because Nigeria is not producing. And apart from Nigeria, I don't know any other central bank that is warehousing naira. I don't think there is any. And this is the tragedy of the entire Africans, where we believe we can compete with the rest of the world by spending our individual currencies, apart from some Francophone countries that came together. And there is drama and all of those, even with that. If you can check the difference between naira and CFA today, of course, you will know that it's not what it used to be. So, first, it is good news that the central bank listened and felt that they need to come back and intervene in the market. The method of intervention is another kettle of fish entirely, and I don't think time will permit me. But of course, out of several recommendations given, they have picked some, and we have seen tangible reports regarding what the central bank have done regarding this. That's on one hand. On the second hand, is it sustainable? It's sustainable for the short term. Whether we can do this in the medium and long term is another kettle of fish. If your currency must improve You must show in the among Committee of Nations that you are a problem solver. We are solving part of our problem, but when it comes to food problem globally, we are not doing that. When it comes to manufacturing problem globally, we are not doing that. When it comes to innovation problem globally, we are not doing that. When it comes to attracting foreign direct investment, especially into the real sector, using hard currency, presenting Nigeria as a country where people can come to invest, we are doing less of that. We have reduced that between 2015 to 2023 when President Buhari was leaving office. That reduced by 80%. So these are the things President Tinubu must look at very carefully and very quickly to say, for us to sustain the energy the central bank is putting in the place and coming back to intervene in the market, which is some of the things we have advised government should do beyond and out. How do we complement this so that some of this policy, in fact, will become sustainable? We have seen 2,000, 1,250, and I think the central bank will want to take 2 steps further to around 1,000. Whether Naira can go lower than 1,000 psychological mark, it's a different kettle of fish already. But I tell you, Naira should be around 1,000, should be around 1,000 and 1,050 across market. That is what I think is objective for Naira to be in today. But I believe that central bank will make some move in the coming period to further push this if they are looking at intervention. And the intervention should not be more than what we are having now. They should not take the money and sink into the market. I don't think that would be fair because it may be tantamount to a waste already. Moderate approach, cautious approach, but get it to the market. But in all of this, you will start seeing reduction in prices. If you sustain this for another 3 months with this lower rate, then it should translate to what we can buy in the market. But in the short term, I'm afraid the short term of 2-3 months is too short for us to feel the impact. And that is why I feel they should have held to feel the impact of FX adjustment as well as what is happening on 400 basis points, now 600 basis points from the first time they met this year to today. Then we can see how the economy will balance out and the kind of growth we want to have.
All right, let's take a break now, Mr. Paul Alaje and Mr. Gbola Olojede.